Hello, I'm Declan Murray, 32 years old, a soldier living in San Antonio, Texas. If you ask me where I'm from, I'd say Wheeling, West Virginia, a small town where everyone knows each other down to the roots of the trees, the blades of grass, and the secrets they try to hide behind the oak doors of their weathered homes. But if you ask me what home is, I'd hesitate. Home to me isn't where I was born. It's where I'm trying to build something. A place where my heart can anchor itself, safe from the cold winds of the past. I'm sitting here in my small San Antonio apartment watching Ellie, my 9-year-old daughter, coloring at the kitchen table. Her brown hair glints under the golden lamplight, and her smile, though rare, is the only thing that keeps me grounded through the darkest days. But to tell you this story, I have to take you back to the beginning, to the days when things started to crack. Not loudly, not shattering all at once, but quietly, like a fracture in glass, spreading until nothing could be salvaged. Wheeling, West Virginia, isn't a place for big dreams. It's an industrial town where steel mill smokestacks choke the sky with haze, and people live by unwritten rules. Work hard, protect your reputation, and never do anything that makes the neighbors whisper behind your back. My family, the Murrays, was part of that tapestry. An Irish Catholic middle-class family with traditional values carved as deeply as the grain in wood. I grew up in a 2-story gray house with a neatly trimmed front yard and a cross hanging above the door. From the outside, everything looked perfect, but inside that house was cold. Not from the temperature, but from the invisible gaps between us. Dad, Mom, my younger sister Colleen, and me. I always felt like a puzzle piece that didn't fit into the family picture. An extra edge no one bothered to find a place for. My father, Daniel Murray, was a tall, broad-shouldered man with eyes as sharp as steel. He worked as a technical supervisor at the local steel mill, a job that demanded absolute precision. Perhaps that's why he brought that same rigidity home. To Dad, everything had to be orderly, rule-bound. He never hugged me, never said I love you or even I'm proud of you. Instead, he taught me about discipline, honor, and upholding the Murray name. Dad never supported my decision to join the military. To him, it was a job for people not smart enough to be engineers or doctors. He wanted me to go to college, become a man in a suit, sit in an office, and bring home prestigious degrees to hang on the wall. But that wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to get out, to feel the world beyond Wheeling's narrow streets, to find a purpose greater than my father's expectations. My mother, Eleanor, was an elegant woman with blonde hair always pinned up and pale blue eyes like a frozen lake. She was a devoted housewife involved in every church activity, from charity drives to organizing the fall festival. But don't let her gentle appearance fool you. She could smile at the neighbors, but with me she was strict, her words cold and cutting. "Declan, you need to know your place," she'd say, her voice even but sharp as a blade. "Don't make me ashamed in front of others." For Mom, appearances were everything. She never asked how I felt, never sat down to hear about my dreams. Instead, she taught me to stand up straight, to bow my head at the right moment in church, and to stay silent when necessary. Mom always sided with Dad, even when I knew she didn't fully agree with him. Once when I was 15, I argued with Dad about wanting to join the school football team. He called it a pointless game, unworthy of a Murray. I looked to Mom, hoping she'd defend me, but she just stared down, her hands clasped tightly, and said, "Listen to your father, Declan. Don't make things more complicated." I learned that in this family, love wasn't about understanding. It was about obedience. Colleen, my sister, 3 years younger than me, was the light in our parents' eyes. With her golden blonde hair and radiant smile, she was everything they wanted in a child. Obedient, beautiful, and skilled at pleasing others. Colleen always knew what to say to make our parents smile, how to make the whole town adore her. At school, she was the prom queen, the cheerleading captain, the girl everyone wanted to befriend. But to me, Colleen wasn't a close sister. When we were kids, she used to follow me everywhere, begging me to play or tell her stories. But as we grew older, she changed. She started looking at me differently, with a mix of pity and disdain. Especially after I decided to join the military, she didn't hold back. "You really want to be a lowly soldier, Declan? Aren't you embarrassed?" Colleen was spoiled by our parents, called the pride of the Murrays. Whenever she got good grades or won an award, they'd throw a small party inviting the neighbors to celebrate. And me? I was just a faint shadow behind her, a brother who was never good enough in their eyes. When Colleen married a wealthy lawyer and had a son, her place in the family was cemented. They called her son the Murray heir, as if I and my future held no value at all. I wasn't a rebellious kid, but I always felt like I didn't belong. I was quiet, preferring to sit alone reading or wandering the fields near our house where I could hear the wind instead of my parents arguing about unmet expectations. I didn't easily bend to senseless rules, and that made me the odd one out in the family. My decision to join the military hit like a bolt of lightning. One day I saw a recruitment poster at school showing a soldier standing tall, eyes resolute. That was who I wanted to be. Not an engineer in an office, not a doctor in a white coat, but a man who could stand up for what he believed in. But when I told my parents, they looked at me as if I'd just declared I was abandoning everything the Murrays stood for. "The military?" Dad roared, his voice echoing through the living room. "Who do you think you are, Declan? Some dead-end soldier? You want the whole town laughing at us?" Mom said nothing, just looked at me with disappointment as if I'd stabbed her in the heart. Colleen, then only 14, sat on the couch giggling. "You sure know how to drive everyone crazy, Declan." I didn't argue back. I stood there feeling the anger in my chest, but also a strange sense of relief. For the first time, I knew I was doing the right thing, not for them, but for me. It was the seed of rebellion, quietly sprouting, preparing for the bigger cracks to come. The day I left Wheeling for military training, the sky was gray, heavy, as if it wanted to weigh down my shoulders. I carried an old backpack, a few sets of clothes, and an acceptance letter from the Army tucked carefully in my jacket pocket. Dad didn't see me off. He sat in the living room reading the newspaper as if my departure wasn't worth looking up for. Mom stood at the door, her hands clasped tightly, and said in her even tone, "Declan, you still have a chance to change your mind. Don't do something you'll regret." I didn't respond. I just nodded, walked out of that house, and felt the door slam shut behind me. Colleen, standing at the second-floor window, watched me with curious eyes, as if I were some strange animal leaving its cage. I didn't look back. I boarded the bus, and as it rolled out of Wheeling, I felt my chest lighten, as if I'd shed an invisible burden. Basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia, was a completely different world. There, no one cared that I was a Murray or where I came from. They only cared how far I could run, how much weight I could lift, and whether I had the courage to endure the grueling days of training. I found a sense of belonging, not from affection but from respect. I worked hard, and for the first time in my life I felt judged for what I did, not for what I was expected to do. I met a woman named Maria in my second year in the Army, after I was transferred to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. It was a hot, humid summer evening at a small bar near the base. I wasn't the partying type, but a buddy from my unit dragged me along to unwind a bit. I sat in the corner sipping a cold beer, watching the noisy crowd. Then I saw her. Maria stood at the bar, chatting with the bartender, her long black hair cascading down her back, her brown eyes sparkling with a vitality I'd never seen in anyone before. She wore a simple green dress, but something about her made it impossible for me to look away. Maybe it was her laugh, not the polite smile my mother used, but a genuine, heartfelt laugh, as if she were savoring every moment of life. I hadn't planned to strike up a conversation. I wasn't good with words, and I always thought I wasn't interesting enough to catch the attention of someone like her. But then she glanced my way, our eyes met, and she smiled. Before I could think, she walked over, set her beer on the table, and said, "You're staring at me like I'm an alien. What's the deal?" I stumbled over my words, mumbling something about not being used to talking to strangers. She laughed loudly, her laugh ringing like wind chimes. Well, I'll start then. I'm Maria. And you are, soldier? That night we talked for hours. Maria told me about herself. She was a nurse at a small hospital raised in Raleigh and had just come out of a failed marriage. She didn't hide her divorce or try to seem perfect. I was drawn to her, not just for her beauty or intelligence, but for the way she lived, free, unafraid of judgment. Maria was everything my family would never accept, a strong, independent woman who wasn't afraid to be herself. Before Maria entered my life, my decision to join the army had already been the first shock to my family. After completing training, I called home to tell them I was officially a soldier. I hoped, even just a little, that they'd be proud. But the call quickly turned into a battle. "You're wasting your life, Declan," Dad said over the phone, his voice cold as ice. "Where do you think being a soldier will get you? A dead-end job with no future? Do you want this family to be ashamed?" I gripped the phone tightly, feeling the blood rush to my head. "This is my life, Dad," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm not living to please all of Wheeling." Mom, as usual, didn't take my side. "You still have time to go back to college, Declan," she said. "Don't let impulsiveness ruin your future." I hung up, my heart pounding. That was the first time I realized my family didn't just disapprove. They saw my choice as a betrayal. I didn't call home often after that. The letters I sent grew shorter, and their responses, if they came at all, were just reminders to rethink or not disgrace the Murray name. When I started dating Maria, I knew my family wouldn't easily accept her. But I didn't expect their opposition to be so fierce. After 6 months together, I decided to bring Maria to Wheeling to meet my parents. I wanted them to see her, not just as a divorced woman, but as someone intelligent, strong, and who truly loved me. That trip was a mistake. From the moment we walked into the house, I could feel the tension. Mom looked Maria up and down, her eyes appraising her like a substandard item. Dad didn't even shake her hand, just gave a cold nod and sat in his armchair, firing off questions like, "Where do you work? What's your family like? Why did you get divorced?" Maria answered calmly, but I could see her hands clenching under the table. She talked about her nursing job, the patients she'd helped, her dream of opening a community health center. But my parents didn't care. To them, Maria was just a woman with a failed marriage, an unacceptable stain in the eyes of the Murrays. After dinner, when Maria went upstairs to wash her hands, Dad called me out to the backyard. Under the dim porch light, he looked me in the eye and said, "Declan, if you marry her, don't call us family anymore. The Murrays don't accept trash like that." I stood frozen, feeling the ground crumble beneath me. "Maria isn't trash," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "She's the woman I love." Dad gave a cold, mocking laugh. "Love? You're still naive, Declan. Love doesn't keep a reputation. Love doesn't pay the bills. She'll drag you down and you'll regret not listening to me." Mom, standing at the back door, added, "You could find a better girl, Declan. Someone worthy of you, of this family." I left Wheeling the next day, hand in hand with Maria. She didn't mention the insults, but I saw her eyes red as we got in the car. About 6 months later, I proposed to Maria on a small hill near Fort Bragg one autumn evening. I didn't have a diamond ring or a grand proposal plan. I just knelt down under the blazing sunset and said, "Maria, you're the reason I want to be a better man. Will you marry me?" She cried, nodded, and hugged me. In that moment, I felt like the happiest man alive, but deep down, I knew the cost of this happiness wouldn't be cheap. I sent wedding invitations to my parents, though I knew they wouldn't come. I still hoped naively that they'd change their minds. But Mom's response was a brief letter. "Declan, you've chosen your path. Don't expect us to come witness your mistake." Colleen didn't even reply. I heard she told neighbors her brother was ruining his life over an unworthy woman. Those words, though not said to my face, cut like knives. Our wedding took place in a small church in Fayetteville, with a few Army friends and Maria's family in attendance. No parents, no Colleen. As I held Maria's hand walking down the aisle between wooden pews, I felt an emptiness in my heart. But when I looked into her eyes, I knew I'd made the right choice. I didn't need my family's approval. I just needed her. After the wedding, my relationship with my family fell into an irreparable chasm. Calls dwindled, then stopped altogether. Colleen later married a wealthy lawyer and lived near our parents. Occasionally, she'd send me texts laced with sarcasm. "Congrats on choosing an interesting life," she wrote with a smiley emoji. I didn't respond. I didn't want to waste energy on people who didn't respect me or Maria. Maria, unlike my family, was the light in my life. She worked at the local hospital, caring for patients with a dedication I always admired. We lived in a modest apartment in Fayetteville, nothing fancy but filled with laughter and warm moments. Every evening when I returned from the base, Maria would be waiting with a simple meal and a smile. "How was your day, soldier?" she'd ask, and all my exhaustion would melt away. But deep down, I knew the rift with my family wasn't just a matter of distance. It was an invisible divide, a fracture that couldn't be mended. And I didn't know that even greater challenges lay ahead. Challenges that would push me toward the most painful decisions of my life. The early years of our marriage felt like a dream, though not a perfect one. And everything became brighter when our family welcomed a new member. Maria found out she was pregnant one spring morning just as I returned from a long training stint. She ran to the door, threw her arms around me and whispered, "Declan, you're going to be a dad." I stood frozen, unsure of what to say, and just held her tightly, my heart feeling like it might burst with happiness. Ellie was born on a rainy October day in a Fayetteville hospital. When I held her for the first time, gazing into her big round eyes and her sleek black hair just like her mother's, I felt an overwhelming sensation, as if the entire world had narrowed to just me and this tiny girl. "Ellie," I whispered, naming her after Maria's late grandmother. Maria smiled from the hospital bed, exhausted but radiant. "She's our everything, Declan." Ellie became the new light in my life. On the nights I stayed up late rocking her to sleep, listening to her steady breathing. I felt myself becoming a better man, not just a soldier, but a father. I wanted to give Ellie everything I never had growing up: unconditional love, understanding, and a home where she'd never feel like an outsider. When Ellie was born, I hoped my family would soften their stance. I sent them a birth announcement with a photo of Ellie, thinking a grandchild might melt their hearts. But their response was as cold as I'd expected. Mom sent a short letter. "Congratulations, Declan. Take good care of her." Not a single word about Maria or an offer to visit their granddaughter. Colleen texted, "Congrats on the kid. Hope she doesn't take after her mom." I gripped the phone, wanting to scream, but I did nothing. I didn't want Ellie to grow up in a family where love was measured by reputation. Maria, after reading Colleen's message, gave a sad smile. "They don't like me, Declan. I'm used to it. But I don't want Ellie to go through that." We decided not to take Ellie to Wheeling. I didn't want her growing up under the cold shadow of the Murray household, where everything had to be proper. But that decision also meant cutting the final thread with my family. The calls stopped entirely. The letters ceased. Wheeling became a distant memory full of scars. Our marriage, once the light of my life, began to show small cracks. After Ellie turned 4, Maria grew distant. She smiled less, often sitting alone on the couch, scrolling through her phone instead of talking to me. I asked what was wrong, but she'd just shake her head and say, "I'm just tired, Declan." "Don't worry." I tried to bridge the gap. I took a few days off to take Maria and Ellie to the beach, hoping a vacation would help her relax. But even there, under the sun and the sound of waves, Maria had moments of silence, her eyes distant as if searching for something out of reach. I told myself she just needed time, that things would be okay. But I missed the clearer signs. One evening after Ellie was asleep, I found Maria's phone left on the kitchen table. A message lit up the screen from an unsaved number. "Tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Usual place?" My heart pounded. I didn't want to believe it, but a heavy feeling rose in my chest. I didn't unlock her phone. I didn't want to be the kind of person who spied on his wife. But from then on, I started noticing more. Maria came home later, often citing extra shifts. She avoided my eyes and our hugs felt awkward. The truth came crashing down one April night when I returned from a short training trip in Texas. I'd planned to surprise Maria with flowers and a home-cooked dinner. But when I stepped into the apartment, I saw Maria packing, a suitcase open on the floor. Ellie was asleep in her room, unaware of the tension in the air. "Declan," Maria said, her voice trembling when she saw me. "I didn't think you'd be back so soon." "What's going on?" I asked, my voice calm but my heart constricting. She looked down, avoiding my gaze. "I'm sorry, Declan. I've met someone else." Her words hit me like a knife to the chest. I stood there, the flowers falling to the floor, trying to process what she'd said. "Someone else?" I repeated, my voice breaking. "Maria, what are you talking about?" She started crying, but it wasn't the cry of remorse. It was the cry of someone who'd made up her mind. "I'm not happy anymore, Declan. I tried, but I can't keep going. You deserve someone better than me." I wanted to yell, to ask why, to know what had changed her. But I just stood there, listening as she told me about a man she'd met at the hospital. A doctor who she said understood her better than I did. I didn't want to hear more. I just wanted her to leave before Ellie woke up and saw her mother tearing our family apart. The divorce was a nightmare. Maria demanded half our assets and I didn't fight it. I just wanted it over quickly and to secure custody of Ellie. Every night as Ellie slept, I sat by her bed watching her small face, wondering what I'd done wrong. I'd given Maria everything I had, but it wasn't enough. And now, all I had left was Ellie, the only light in a crumbling world. My family in Wheeling never reached out. I didn't tell them about the divorce and they didn't ask. Maybe they heard through the grapevine, but to them I was just another failure not worth their concern. I didn't need them. I had Ellie, and I swore she'd never endure what I went through. The months after Maria left felt like Ellie and I were survivors of a hurricane. Our small apartment in Fayetteville was now filled only with Ellie's bright laughter and my clumsy attempts to be a good father. I learned to tie her hair, though her curly locks kept slipping through my fingers as if teasing me. I learned to cook simple meals, pasta with tomato sauce, grilled cheese sandwiches, and I learned to answer the tough questions of a 5-year-old. "Daddy, why doesn't Mommy call me?" Every time Ellie asked about Maria, my heart felt like it was being squeezed. I didn't want to lie, but I couldn't tell her the truth, that her mother had chosen a new life without us. So I hugged her, kissed her forehead and said, "Mommy loves you, Ellie, but she's working far away right now. Daddy's here and I'll always be here." Ellie nodded, her big round eyes full of trust, but I knew she was hiding her sadness. She was only 5, but she'd already learned to carry big emotions in her small heart. Work at Fort Bragg grew more demanding. I got promoted, but with that came heavier responsibilities. Longer training sessions, short-term trips, and the constant pressure to be ready at a moment's notice. I tried to balance the Army with fatherhood. I hired a part-time babysitter, Mrs. Linda, an older woman who lived a few blocks away. She looked after Ellie when I was at work, but every time I left the house and saw Ellie waving through the window, I felt like I was abandoning her. The deployment order hit like a sucker punch. It was a June afternoon and I was at the Fort Bragg office reviewing training schedules. My commander called me in, handed me a brown envelope and said in a stern voice, "Murray, you're being deployed to Romania. 10-month assignment. Get ready. You leave next week." I stood there, envelope in hand, feeling the floor collapse beneath me. "Romania?" I repeated, my voice hoarse. "Sir, I have a daughter. I can't leave her for almost a year." My commander looked at me, his eyes devoid of sympathy. "This is the Army, Murray. You know the rules. Figure it out." I returned to the apartment that night, my mind reeling. Ellie was sitting on the floor, coloring a picture of a house surrounded by trees. She looked up, smiled, and said, "Daddy, I drew our house. There's you and me and even a dog." I knelt down, hugged her, but couldn't smile. 10 months. How could I leave Ellie for 10 months? How could I leave her alone after everything she'd been through? I called Mrs. Linda, asking if she could care for Ellie long term, but she shook her head, her voice apologetic. "Declan, I love Ellie, but I'm old. I can't look after her day and night for 10 months. I reached out to a few army buddies, but no one could take on such a big responsibility. I even considered hiring a full-time nanny, but with my salary, that was a pipe dream. Then, like a ghost from the past, the thought of Wheeling crept in. My parents. They were the only family I had left, though family wasn't a word I'd use to describe them. I sat on the couch, staring at Ellie's drawing, my stomach twisting. Send Ellie to Wheeling? To that cold house where I never felt loved? The idea made me want to scream, but I was out of options. I called my mother one evening after Ellie was asleep. The phone rang so long I thought she wouldn't answer. But then her voice came through as cold as I remembered. "Declan? Why are you calling this late?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mom, I'm being deployed overseas, 10 months in Romania. I have no one to look after Ellie. I'm asking, could you and Dad take care of her?" Silence on the other end. Then Mom spoke, her voice devoid of warmth. "You're leaving her with us? After everything you've done? What do you think we are, Declan? A daycare?" I gripped the phone, feeling my blood boil. "Mom, I have no choice. Ellie's your granddaughter. I'm just asking for your help this one time." Another pause, then a sigh. "Fine. We'll take her, but don't think this is about family, it's duty. Bring her here before you leave." I hung up, feeling like I'd swallowed a stone. Duty. That's how my mother saw caring for her own granddaughter. Not love, not family responsibility, but duty. But I had no other path. I couldn't take Ellie to Romania, and I couldn't refuse the deployment. That would mean destroying the career I'd poured my sweat into building. I spent the next week preparing Ellie. I sat her down, hugged her, and tried to explain in words a 5-year-old could understand. "Daddy has to go work far away for a while, Ellie. You'll stay with Grandma and Grandpa for a bit, but I'll call you every day, okay?" Ellie looked at me, her big eyes full of worry. "Will Grandma and Grandpa like me, Daddy?" Her question cut like a knife. I hugged her tightly, whispering, "Everyone will love you because you're the most wonderful girl in the world." But inside, I wasn't sure. I knew my parents, and I knew they weren't the type to hug or comfort a child. I only hoped Ellie was strong enough to get through it, and I swore I'd come back as soon as I could. The day I took Ellie to Wheeling, it was pouring rain. I drove over 6 hours from Fayetteville with Ellie in the back seat, clutching her favorite doll. She sang a nursery rhyme softly, but her voice faded as we neared Wheeling. I glanced at her in the rearview mirror, seeing sadness in her eyes. "Daddy, can I bring my picture?" she asked, pointing to the drawing of the house she'd colored. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, forcing a smile. "Bring anything you want." When we arrived at my parents' house, the gray house was exactly as I remembered, cold, tidy, devoid of warmth. Mom opened the door, eyeing Ellie with a scrutinizing gaze, then nodded at me. "Bring her in, Declan. We've prepared a small room." Dad was in the living room, not bothering to stand. He just looked at me, his eyes sharp as knives. 10 months, huh? You're leaving her with us, and what happens if something goes wrong?" "I'll be back as soon as I can," I said, trying to stay calm. "Thank you for helping." Ellie clung to my hand, unwilling to let go. I knelt down, hugged her, and whispered, "I love you, Ellie. I'll call every day and I'll come get you soon, okay?" She nodded, but tears rolled down her cheeks. My heart broke into pieces. As I left, seeing Ellie standing at the door, small and alone next to my mother, I had to turn away so she wouldn't see my eyes welling up. I got in the car, drove off in the rain, and told myself, "Just 10 months, I can do this." In Romania, my life was a blur of long days and sleepless nights. My assignment was to support training and coordination with the local military, But my mind was always thousands of miles away, in Wheeling with Ellie. I video called her every night, no matter how exhausted I was. The phone screen was my only connection to my daughter. For the first few weeks, Ellie still smiled, telling me about the pictures she drew or the butterflies she saw in the yard. But gradually her voice grew quieter, her eyes less bright. "Daddy, Grandma, and Grandpa don't play with me," she said once, her voice trembling. "They tell me to sit still and not make noise." I gripped the phone, forcing a cheerful tone. "It's just for a little while, Ellie. I'll be back soon. Tell me what you did today." But Ellie's stories grew heavier, weighing on my heart. She told me they made her eat alone in the kitchen, not at the table with them. "Grandpa says I eat too slowly," she whispered, as if afraid someone might hear. Another time, she said Colleen, now with a son named Tommy, came over and scolded her for spilling water on the table. She said, "I'm clumsy, Daddy." I wanted to fly back immediately to scoop Ellie out of that house, but I was stuck in Romania, bound by duty and military discipline. All I could do was comfort her through the screen, counting the days until I could return. Each call was a new stab, but I couldn't stop calling. It was the only way to know Ellie was okay. One night, Ellie called me, her voice choked with tears. "Daddy, I want to come home. I don't like it here." I asked what happened, and she told me, her voice shaking. "Tommy pushed me down, and Aunt Colleen yelled at me. Grandma said I need to be better, but I don't know how." My blood boiled. Colleen, my sister who never saw me as a brother, was now taking out her bitterness on my daughter. And my parents, who should have protected Ellie, sided with Colleen. I wanted to scream, to break something, but all I could say was, "You're the best girl, Ellie. Don't listen to them. Daddy loves you, and I'll be back soon." After that call, I wrote a handwritten letter to my mother, trying to keep my tone civil. "Mom, please take care of Ellie kindly. She hasn't done anything wrong. She just needs love." I got no response. Instead, Mom called back, her voice icy. "Declan, we're doing our best, but she's not like Tommy. She needs to learn how to behave." I hung up, feeling like the world was against me. I swore to myself that when I returned, I'd get Ellie out of Wheeling, no matter the cost. The 10 months in Romania felt like a lifetime. Each day was a battle between duty and my longing for Ellie. I counted the days on a calendar, marking each passing week. I sent handwritten letters to Ellie filled with silly stories about a flying dog or a superhero soldier, hoping they'd make her smile. Ellie responded with drawings, houses, trees, and pictures of us holding hands. But I noticed with each letter her words carried less of the innocence I cherished. "Daddy, I miss you," she wrote, her scribbled handwriting piercing my heart. Finally, after 10 grueling months, I was allowed to return home. The sky in Fayetteville was clear that day, but my heart was heavy with dark clouds. I'd completed my mission in Romania, earning praise from my superiors for my professionalism, but their words meant nothing. All I wanted was to hold Ellie, take her away from Wheeling, and start our life as father and daughter anew. I drove from Fayetteville to Wheeling, a 6-hour journey, my heart pounding with a mix of excitement and dread. I imagined Ellie running into my arms, her smile lighting up her small face. I'd bought a large brown teddy bear with sparkling eyes, hoping it would make her laugh. But deep down, I was afraid. Afraid that 10 months in that house had changed Ellie, had stolen the innocence I loved so much. When I arrived in Wheeling, it was dusk. My parents' gray house loomed under the streetlights, as cold and unchanging as I remembered. I knocked on the door, gripping the bag with the teddy bear, silently praying everything would be okay. Mom opened the door, looking at me with no trace of warmth. "Declan," she said evenly, "you're back. Come in." I stepped inside, searching for Ellie immediately. She was sitting in the corner of the living room, clutching her old doll, her eyes downcast. "Ellie," I called, my voice louder than intended. She looked up, her eyes brightening for a moment, then ran to me. I knelt down, hugging her tightly, feeling her small body tremble in my arms. "I missed you so much," I whispered, fighting back tears. But I knew instantly something was wrong. Ellie didn't smile as I'd hoped. She was thinner, her face pale, and her eyes, once bright as stars, were now clouded, as if she'd learned to hide her emotions. "I'm back, Ellie," I said, stroking her hair. "We're going home, okay?" She nodded but said nothing. I looked around, noticing Dad sitting in his armchair, reading the newspaper, not bothering to look up. Colleen, my sister, stood at the kitchen doorway with her son Tommy, her eyes as cold as Mom's. "Hey, big brother," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Long time no see." I'd arrived on a weekend when my parents were hosting a small family and neighbor gathering. They insisted Ellie and I stay for the dinner before leaving. I agreed, wanting to keep things civil for their sake. Ellie was seated at a corner of the table next to Tommy, a 5-year-old with blonde hair like his mother. I sat across from her, trying to engage her in conversation, but Ellie only gave short answers, her eyes avoiding mine. I looked to Mom, hoping she'd say something to ease the tension, but she was busy hosting, smiling as if everything was perfect. Then it happened, quick as a flash. Tommy, fidgeting with his glass of water, accidentally spilled some on his shirt. He yelped, and before I could react, Colleen shot up, pointing at Ellie. "You spilled water on Tommy's new clothes." Ellie shrank back, her eyes wide with fear. "I didn't do anything," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I was just sitting here." But Colleen didn't stop. She stormed over, raised her hand, and slapped Ellie hard across the cheek. The sharp crack echoed through the room, silencing everyone. Ellie burst into sobs, her face red, clutching her cheek. I leapt to my feet, my blood boiling, the world spinning around me. "Colleen," I roared, stepping in front of Ellie. "You dare hit her? Over a spilled glass of water?" Colleen glared at me, her eyes defiant. "She needs to learn manners, Declan. She's not the center of everything." I turned to my parents, hoping they'd say something, anything, to defend Ellie. But Mom looked away, and Dad, still in his armchair, said coldly, "She deserved it. The girl needs discipline." My heart shattered. Ellie, still crying, clutched my hand and whispered, "Daddy, I want to go home." Her words were the final knife, tearing apart any remaining hope I had. I scooped Ellie up, not saying a word, and walked out of that house. Her sobs filled the cold air, mingling with the sound of rain starting to fall. I buckled her into the back seat, hugged her tightly, and said, "You're everything to me, Ellie. No one will hurt you. Never again." In the car, I drove away without looking back. Ellie sat silently, clutching the teddy bear I'd bought, her eyes still red. A fire of anger burned in my chest, but it wasn't just anger, it was a cold clarity. My family, who should have loved and protected Ellie, had chosen cruelty and reputation instead. They didn't deserve to be part of our lives. When we returned to Fayetteville, I brought Ellie into my small apartment and laid her on the bed with the teddy bear I had bought before leaving for Romania. "Good night, sweetheart," I whispered, stroking her hair. Ellie nodded, her eyelids heavy, but before she drifted off, she grabbed my hand and asked, "Daddy, we won't go back there, right?" "Never," I said firmly. "From now on, it's just you and me." Once Ellie was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote a letter to my parents. I didn't let emotion guide me. I wanted my words to be sharp, clear, and unmistakable. "Mom, Dad, today I saw how you and Colleen treated Ellie. Your granddaughter, my daughter. I'd hoped that, even if you didn't love me, you'd love her. I was wrong. As of today, Ellie and I are no longer part of this family. Don't contact us. Don't look for us. We don't need you, just as you've never needed us." I mailed the letter, expecting no reply. It wasn't a goodbye, it was a declaration. I was done with Wheeling, with the Murrays, and with the wounds they'd left in me. A few weeks later, I received notice from my commander. I was being transferred to Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas. It was a chance for a fresh start, to leave behind the painful memories of Fayetteville and Wheeling. I didn't hesitate. I packed our belongings, keeping only the essentials, clothes, a few books, and Ellie's drawings. Everything else, from the old sofa to the photos of Maria and me, I left behind. I didn't want to carry any fragments of the past. San Antonio welcomed us with brilliant sunshine and tree-lined streets. I rented a small house in the suburbs with a backyard big enough for Ellie to run around. The house wasn't fancy. The beige paint on the walls was faded, the wooden floors creaked. But it was ours. I hung Ellie's drawings on the walls, placed a potted plant on the windowsill, and bought a small kitchen table where we could eat dinner together. It was a humble beginning, but to me it was an entire world. Ellie, though only 5, seemed to sense the change. She stopped asking about Wheeling or her grandparents, but I could tell she still carried invisible wounds. Sometimes I'd find her sitting quietly, clutching her doll, her eyes distant. I knew the months in Wheeling had left their mark, and I blamed myself for letting her endure that. I realized Ellie needed more than my hugs and reassurances. A friend at the base, Sergeant Ramirez, suggested I take her to a child therapist. "She's been through a lot, Declan," he said. "Sometimes kids need a safe place to talk about things they can't tell their parents." I hesitated. I didn't want Ellie to think there was something wrong with her. But when I noticed her flinching at loud noises or shying away when I accidentally mentioned family, I knew I couldn't delay. I contacted a therapist, Ms. Anna, a gentlewoman with a warm smile. She met with Ellie weekly in a colorful room filled with toys and books. At first, Ellie didn't say much. Ms. Anna told me she mostly drew, her pictures full of tangled lines and dark colors. But gradually, Ellie opened up. One day when I came to pick her up, Ms. Anna pulled me aside and said, "Ellie's very strong, Mr. Murray. She feels safe with you, but she needs time to understand it's not her fault when people treat her poorly." Her words hit me like a punch to the heart. I'd tried to protect Ellie, but I couldn't erase what she'd been through. I started spending more time with her, not just playing, but listening. I asked about her drawings, her dreams, the things that made her smile. Slowly, I saw the light return to Ellie's eyes. Not as bright as before, but enough to give me hope. San Antonio became our true home through small moments. Every weekend, I took Ellie to a nearby park where she loved swinging on the swings and chasing butterflies. I bought a golden retriever puppy named Max, and Ellie's laughter as she played with him was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. We started planting in the backyard, small cacti and a young apple tree that Ellie insisted on calling the magic tree. One afternoon, as we watered the plants, Ellie suddenly hugged me, her face smudged with dirt. "Daddy, I like it here," she said. "It's more fun than Grandma and Grandpa's." I knelt down, hugged her, and felt hot tears on my cheeks. "I like it here too, Ellie," I replied, "because you're here." In the evenings, I read bedtime stories to Ellie, usually adventure tales she loved. Sometimes I'd share stories from my army days, edited to be silly tales about a superhero soldier. Ellie would giggle, begging for more, and I realized that though our life wasn't perfect, it was ours. Being a single dad wasn't easy. Some days I came home from the base so exhausted I wanted to collapse on the couch, but Ellie would drag me to the backyard to play or ask for help with her homework. I learned to balance work and family, the discipline of the army, and the gentleness Ellie needed. I didn't want to be like my father, a man who only gave orders and expectations. I wanted to be the dad Ellie could rely on, who listened and loved her unconditionally. I began to understand that being a father wasn't just about providing or protecting. It was about being present, truly present, in the moments that mattered. When Ellie rode her bike without me holding on for the first time, I ran behind her, cheering like a kid. When she brought home a drawing praised by her teacher, I hung it on the fridge like a medal of honor. Those moments, however small, were the bricks building our new home, a home free of judgment or coldness. I cut off all contact with my family in Wheeling. No letters, no calls, no curiosity about their lives. Once my mother called, leaving a brief voicemail. "Declan, you can't abandon your family like this. Think it over." I deleted it without replying. I'd spent my life trying to please them, but now I only wanted to do right by Ellie. I didn't look into Maria's life either. I heard she was living somewhere in California with the other man, but I didn't care. She chose to leave us, and I'd learned to live without her. All I needed was Ellie, and I'd do anything to give her a happy life. Though it was just the two of us, I didn't feel alone. In San Antonio, I found a community, friends from the Army, kind neighbors, and Ms. Anna, who helped Ellie Hawkins' medical center Ellie heal. Sergeant Ramirez and his wife, Carla, often invited us over for dinner, and Carla taught Ellie how to make cookies. Mrs. Linda, Ellie's old babysitter, sent letters checking in and knitted Ellie a wool hat. These people, though not blood family, became our family. One evening, as Ellie and I sat in the backyard looking at the starry sky, she suddenly said, "Daddy, we're going to be okay, right?" I smiled, pulling her into my lap. "We're going to be more than okay, Ellie. We've got each other." About a year after we settled in San Antonio, I received news about Colleen from an old friend in Wheeling, Sarah, through a brief message. "Declan, I thought you should know. Colleen's in big trouble." I sat on the couch, phone in hand, torn between curiosity and indifference. I wanted nothing to do with Wheeling anymore, but a part of me wondered what had happened to my sister, the one who slapped Ellie and treated us like outsiders. Sarah explained that Colleen's marriage had fallen apart. Her husband, a wealthy lawyer, couldn't tolerate her jealousy and violent outbursts. He filed for divorce, cutting off all financial support, leaving Colleen and her son Tommy in dire straits. They were forced to move back in with our parents in Wheeling into the same gray house I'd left behind. But the story didn't end there. Colleen had caused a scandal by assaulting a neighbor's child after the boy bumped into Tommy during play. The neighbor's family was threatening to sue, demanding substantial compensation. I read Sarah's message, picturing Colleen, once the pride of the Murrays, now struggling in that stifling house, the subject of neighborhood gossip. A part of me felt a grim satisfaction, not because I wanted her to suffer, but because I knew she was reaping what she'd sown. That feeling quickly faded into emptiness. I didn't want to live with hatred, didn't want to become like them. A week after hearing the news, my mother called. I stared at her number on the screen, hesitant, but finally answered. Her voice came through, no longer cold, but filled with worry. "Declan, we need to talk. Colleen, she's in trouble. We need your help." I gripped the phone, feeling an old wave of resentment surge back. "Help? After everything that's happened? Are you joking?" Mom sighed, her voice trembling. "Declan, you're her brother. You can't turn your back on family. Colleen's being sued, and your father and I don't have the money to handle this." I almost laughed, but not from amusement. "Family? You call that family? Colleen slapped Ellie, and you and Dad said she deserved it. Now you want me to help her?" Silence on the other end. Then Mom's voice softened. "We were wrong, Declan. But think of Tommy. He's your nephew." I hung up without letting her say more. Tommy might be my nephew, but Ellie was my daughter, and none of them had ever treated her like family. I remembered Ellie's frightened eyes, her heartbreaking question about her grandparents. No, I owed them nothing. I sat at the kitchen table looking out at the backyard where Ellie was playing with Max, our golden retriever. She laughed loudly as Max chased a ball, and that sound was all I needed to remind myself I'd made the right choice. I didn't need Wheeling, my parents, or Colleen. I had Ellie, and I had a new life in San Antonio, one unbound by the past. I didn't answer any calls from my parents after that. I deleted their messages, blocked their numbers. I didn't want to know how they were living, didn't want to be dragged back into that cold world. Colleen had chosen her path, and my parents had chosen to stand by her. Now they had to face the consequences. I returned to my life, focusing on Ellie and my work at Fort Sam Houston. Ellie grew happier, making new friends at school, and her drawings were now bursting with vibrant colors. I knew she still carried scars from Wheeling, but I believed that with time and love she would heal. I didn't need revenge. My greatest act was living well for Ellie, for myself. Every day I strove to be the father I never had, and that was how I overcame the past. My life isn't a fairy tale. I've lost my family, my love, and nearly myself. But I've learned that family isn't about blood. It's about those who stand by you, who love you unconditionally. Ellie taught me that. She's my guiding light, reminding me that true love doesn't need reputation or perfection. It just needs sincerity. I've also learned that forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing to live free from the past's chains. I don't forgive my parents or Colleen for what they did, but I choose not to let anger define me. Instead, I'm building a life where Ellie can grow up strong, confident, and knowing she's always loved. If you're reading this story, I want to tell you, cherish those who truly love you, and don't be afraid to cut ties with toxic relationships, no matter who they are. Life is too short to live for others' expectations. Choose your own path, and if you have someone to protect, like I have Ellie, do everything to make them feel safe and loved. That's the greatest victory.